Jeremy Clarkson spent 30 years losing control on purpose, on camera. He crossed pack ice to the North Pole. He set his own tent on fire. He blew up a house for no reason except that it would look incredible. None of that ended his career. A missing plate of steak and chips did. 16 moments, some hilarious, a few genuinely nearly fatal. Every one proof that Clarkson never tried to be sensible. Not once, not for a second. Let's find out how a steak dinner did what a fighter jet and a Bugatti couldn't. By 2015, Clarkson had spent 13 years turning Top Gear into the most watched factual show on the planet, syndicated to over 200 territories, loved by an audience stretching from Surrey to Seoul. He'd also spent 13 years testing the patience of everyone at the BBC unlucky enough to manage him. The end wasn't about a car at all. It was about a steak. After a long day filming in North Yorkshire, exhausted and in a foul mood by his own admission, Clarkson got back to the hotel expecting hot food waiting for him. There wasn't any. Producer H982 delivered the news. The kitchen had closed. What followed was 30 seconds in a hotel car park, out of shot, away from any camera that might have softened it. A shouting match, a punch, a split lip, blood on a shirt. The BBC investigated. Statements were taken. The tabloids went into a feeding frenzy, dragging up a decade of prior complaints. Clarkson didn't hide behind lawyers or spin. He said it the way he says everything. I hit him. No qualification. No softening. The corporation had no choice left. Top Gear's biggest star, its entire reason for existing in most viewers' eyes, was suspended, then axed outright. Hammond and May walked out of loyalty, not obligation. An institution that took 13 years to build ended in one evening, over a missing plate of steak and chips. Within a year, all three resurfaced richer and freer than ever on a rival platform. But the BBC's Top Gear, the one Britain grew up with, was finished for good. And everyone in that car park knew it the moment the punch landed. In 2014, the Top Gear crew rolled into Argentina for a South American road trip special. 3 battered cars, winding through mountain passes toward Patagonia. One of them carried the registration plate H982 FKL. Nobody on the production checked it twice. Argentina noticed within hours. To British eyes, it was just a number. To an Argentine audience still raising children on stories of 1982, it read as a direct, deliberate taunt. A war fought over a handful of islands in the South Atlantic, still mourned every single year. Convoys of furious locals started tracking the crew from town to town. By nightfall, it had turned genuinely dangerous. Cars pelted with rocks, windows cracked. The crew abandoned equipment worth hundreds of thousands of pounds and fled across the border into Chile under police escort. Clarkson insisted, publicly and under oath to the BBC's own internal inquiry, that the plate was coincidence, fitted months earlier for an unrelated shoot, with no thought given to the numbers. The BBC's investigation largely agreed with him. Agreement changed nothing on the ground. Diplomatic complaints landed on desks in London and Buenos Aires. The special had to be rebuilt from salvaged footage. One of the most expensive Top Gear shoots ever made came within a hair's breadth of becoming an actual international incident. All because of 7 characters nobody thought worth a second glance. In 2007, Clarkson and Hammond set out to do something no wheeled vehicle had ever done: drive to the magnetic North Pole. This wasn't a run across flat snow. Their car was a heavily modified Toyota Hilux, fitted with tank tracks instead of tires, built to survive conditions that could kill an unprepared man in hours. Temperatures dropped past -40. The ice shifted and cracked beneath the vehicle without warning. They crossed pack ice that was, quite literally, drifting on the ocean beneath them, solid one moment, dangerously thin the next. One wrong turn meant plunging into freezing water with no realistic chance of rescue. Frostbite wasn't a scripted danger. It was an hourly risk. Fingers went numb inside thick gloves. Breath froze on beards within minutes outside the cab. Against every reasonable expectation, they made it. Guinness World Records confirmed them as the first people ever to reach the magnetic North Pole in a vehicle. Clarkson, never one to romanticize suffering, still called it one of the most physically miserable weeks of his life, worse than any studio stunt could fake. It's one of Top Gear's most extraordinary achievements, because nobody remotely sensible would have attempted it, and because for once, the danger on screen was exactly as real as it looked. In 2008, the trio rode motorbikes the length of Vietnam, from the chaos of Saigon to Halong Bay in the north. Almost none of it went to plan. Clarkson, on a machine entirely unsuited to the terrain and the heat, crashed repeatedly on roads shared with buffalo, chickens, overloaded trucks, and traffic that obeyed no rule any of them recognized. At one point, high on a mountain pass with a sheer drop on one side, his bike simply gave out beneath him. He kept going afterward, battered, visibly bruised, and by his own account genuinely frightened, for what felt like the first time on camera. The heat blurred vision by midday. The roads were closer to rubble than tarmac for hundreds of miles. Yet the special became one of the most beloved in Top Gear's history, precisely because the suffering was completely unfaked. No stunt double waiting off camera, no safety net beyond whatever first aid the crew could carry. When Clarkson finally crossed the finish line, exhausted and half-broken, the relief on his face wasn't performance. It was a man who genuinely hadn't been sure, an hour earlier, that he'd make it at all. Botswana, 2007. The crew was thrown into the Okavango Delta with 3 cheap, ill-suited cars, and a route designed to break every one of them. Crocodile-infested rivers had to be forded on hope and momentum alone. Elephants blocked the road with zero interest in a film crew's schedule. The cars disintegrated piece by piece under mud, water, and heat they were never built for. At one particularly grim stage, Clarkson's car sat stuck axle-deep in mud with darkness closing in and no recovery vehicle within miles. Out there, in real wilderness, there was no guarantee of rescue if anything went wrong, and every member of the crew knew it. It became one of Top Gear's most critically acclaimed specials, less for the cars, and more for the sheer unglamorous will it took just to finish. Clarkson later admitted the Delta taught him more about genuine fear than any studio stunt or fast lap ever had. No writer could engineer an ending like that. The landscape simply refused to cooperate, and that raw indifference is exactly what made it unforgettable. Quick pause. If you're enjoying this so far, hit like, drop a comment telling me which entry has surprised you most, and subscribe if you haven't already. Back to the list. In 2008, Clarkson reviewed an early Tesla Roadster for Top Gear. The segment showed the car apparently running out of charge on set, pushed into a hangar by crew rather than driven. Tesla cried foul immediately. The footage was staged, they said, and the car had never actually run flat on camera. It became a legal battle that dragged on for the better part of 5 years, through multiple courts, lawyers combing raw footage frame by frame. Tesla sued for defamation, seeking damages and a retraction. The case reached the Court of Appeal in London. Clarkson and the BBC won outright. The court ruled the review was fair comment, not fabrication. Elon Musk never fully let it go, needling Clarkson publicly for years afterward. Clarkson maintained he'd simply reviewed the car exactly as it behaved on the day. A company as powerful and well-funded as Tesla chose to fight a car review in open court for 5 years, rather than just let it pass. That alone tells you how much weight a Clarkson review actually carried. Clarkson and the team drove into the Chernobyl exclusion zone itself, past the abandoned city of Pripyat, Geiger counters clicking audibly on the dashboard. This wasn't dramatized. The radiation readings were real, and so were the strict limits on how long anyone could safely stay in certain areas. He walked through crumbling apartment blocks, still furnished as their owners left them in 1986, and past a rusting fairground frozen mid-use, a Ferris wheel that never turned again, bumper cars under decades of dust. He was visibly unsettled by the silence of a city built for 50,000 people, now home to none. Crews wore dosimeters clipped to their jackets. Certain streets were simply off limits. No negotiation. It's one of the most haunting pieces of television Top Gear ever made, because nothing needed exaggerating. The eeriness did all the work itself. For a show built on noise, speed, and bravado, the quiet dread of Chernobyl proved Clarkson could do stillness and horror just as well as spectacle. In 2005, Clarkson took a Bugatti Veyron to its absolute top speed on a closed track, over 250 mph. At that velocity, the smallest steering error stops being a mistake and becomes a catastrophe. The car covers a full football pitch in under a second. Human reaction time isn't fast enough to correct anything. Mid-run, one tire began showing stress the engineers hadn't fully accounted for. Bugatti's own technicians later admitted, uncomfortably, that the margin for error at that speed was close to none. Clarkson brought the car down safely, the deceleration alone a genuine physical ordeal. The sequence became one of the most replayed pieces of Top Gear footage ever broadcast. He later admitted, with rare understatement, that it was properly terrifying. High praise from a man never short of superlatives, and a rare honest admission that even he felt real fear behind the wheel that day. In one of Top Gear's most memorable challenges, Clarkson raced a supercar against a fighter jet down open runway, raw acceleration against military engineering. The jet held every advantage. No road car built for public roads was ever going to win. What made it compelling wasn't the outcome, never remotely in doubt. It was the commentary. Clarkson turned near certain defeat into gripping television, needling the pilot over the radio, questioning the fairness of the whole contest, making a car losing to an aircraft feel genuinely tense right up to the line. That's the trick people underestimate about Clarkson. He didn't need the underdog to win. He needed you to care, even briefly, whether it might. That's harder to pull off than just filming something fast and loud. And it's exactly why clips like this still circulate years later, watched by people who never saw Top Gear live. For one challenge, the trio built homemade amphibious cars and attempted to cross the English Channel. Clarkson's build, assembled with more optimism than engineering rigor, started taking on water almost the moment it hit open sea. What followed was a slow, sinking humiliation on camera, the vehicle settling lower with every passing minute, Clarkson's commentary growing more desperate as a 2-hour crossing threatened to end at the bottom of a shipping lane instead. Rescue boat. In another challenge built almost entirely for disaster, the presenters converted ordinary vehicles into homemade motorhomes. Clarkson's build was the first to fall apart, fixtures loosening within the first few miles, the structure groaning under strain it was never designed for. Furniture shifted mid-drive, water tanks failed and flooded the cabin floor. What was meant to be a home on wheels became a slow-motion demolition derby, one collapsing shelf at a time. Clarkson refused to treat any of it as failure worth mourning. He leaned into the chaos, narrating each fresh catastrophe with the enthusiasm of a man who'd always rather things went wrong spectacularly than went right quietly. That instinct, turning disaster into entertainment without missing a beat, is exactly what kept audiences coming back, series after series. Few images define early Top Gear quite like a reliant robin refusing to stay on its wheels. The three-wheeled car, already notorious for instability, tipped over during testing, not once, but repeatedly, becoming a running joke across multiple series. Clarkson leaned into it with obvious relish, treating every fresh rollover as further proof of a point he'd apparently been making all along. Engineers and reliant enthusiasts cried foul, insisting the tipping was staged. Clarkson never once slowed down to address it seriously on air. The segments became so iconic that an overturned robin is instantly recognizable even to people who've never watched a full episode. It's a useful reminder that Clarkson's genius was rarely about subtlety. It was about finding one absurd, undeniable image and repeating it gleefully until it became legend. 5 down, 11 to go. If you're enjoying the ride, hit like, tell me in the comments which of these you remember watching live, and subscribe for more. For one special, Clarkson was asked to demonstrate a caravan's structural weakness under impact. Instead of a modest, controlled test, the segment escalated with barely a pause into detonating an entire house to make the point. The explosion was filmed from multiple angles, the fireball and shockwave rolling outward in a way no CGI render could replicate. Safety teams kept everyone at a serious distance, and even from there, camera lenses shook and dust rose across the whole set. It was gratuitous, entirely unnecessary to make the actual point, and completely irresistible television anyway. That's the exact combination Clarkson built his career on. There was never any pretense that blowing up a house was the only way to show structural weakness. It was simply, unarguably, the most entertaining way available. And that distinction, repeated for 3 decades, is precisely what separated Top Gear from everything that tried and failed to copy it. Since 2021, Clarkson's Farm has shown a very different side of the man, humbled, repeatedly and publicly, by the unforgiving reality of British agriculture. Crops failed outright. Machinery broke down at the worst moments. A 6-figure combine harvester proved no match for British weather that refused, series after series, to cooperate with any filming schedule. One season alone saw losses running into the hundreds of thousands of pounds, laid bare on screen, spreadsheets and all, no spin. Clarkson, so often the one dishing out mockery, became for once the punchline of his own show, outwitted by soil, rainfall, and a bureaucratic maze of farming regulation that seemed determined to beat him at every turn. What could easily have been humiliating turned into something more valuable. Genuine, hard-won respect for an industry he'd never taken seriously before. Farmers across the country, many skeptical at first of a celebrity playing at their profession, ended up crediting the show with shifting public perception of their work almost overnight. The same man who once blew up a house purely for entertainment ended up making a nation care about the price of wheat. Filming the Grand Tour's Madagascar special in 2019, Clarkson accidentally set fire to his own tent overnight, waking to find the canvas already ablaze in the dark. He escaped without serious injury, but the incident became emblematic of a shoot that seemed permanently one step from disaster. Vehicles broke down repeatedly in remote terrain with no realistic recovery option nearby. Camera and sound equipment failed routinely in the heat. More than once, the crew found themselves genuinely stranded, hours from any meaningful help, relying entirely on local knowledge to keep filming at all. Clarkson later admitted, without his usual bravado, that some of those expeditions carried real, uninsurable risk no production budget could fully account for. Unlike the semi-controlled chaos of the amphibious cars or the collapsing motorhomes, this wasn't built-in entertainment. It was the raw unpredictability of filming somewhere most sensible production companies would never attempt, and that particular night, it came far closer to tragedy than to television. We've saved the defining moment for last, the one that quietly explains every other entry on this list. Across 3 decades on screen, Clarkson never hid his guiding philosophy behind a convenient euphemism: fuel economy, sensible motoring, environmental caution. All of it was, in his own repeated words, entirely secondary to one thing: speed and power. It wasn't a slogan invented for a poster. It was the genuine organizing principle behind everything he did on screen. Every reckless overtake at dawn, every absurd top-speed run down an empty runway, every review that dismissed practicality in favor of pure thrill. Critics called it irresponsible for decades. Millions of viewers called it exactly why they kept tuning in, week after week. That unapologetic honesty is the thread connecting everything on this list. The burning tent in Madagascar, the exploding house, the frozen crossing to the pole, the punch thrown in a car park over cold food. Clarkson never pretended to be sensible, and never apologized for failing to be. He simply chased the biggest, loudest, fastest version of every idea he was ever handed. Consequences be damned. And somehow, against every reasonable expectation, built a genuine broadcasting empire out of doing exactly that. And there you have it. 16 moments that prove, beyond any real doubt, that Jeremy Clarkson has never once done anything the easy way. If this took you back, or we missed your personal favorite, drop it in the comments. Give this video a like if you enjoyed the countdown, subscribe to SoilVanta for more stories from British life, and I'll see you in the next one.